really got to try on that left-hand side. What happened?
Oh, but I've gone up and over and bloody head over biscuit. It wasn't enough stability there for myself, but no, I was busting for a bit of meat this game. It didn't seem to work out.
Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, the weekly show for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more, all about the world of rugby. As always, my name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, I'm easy enough to find on all your socials, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, as you've no doubt guessed by now, this is not your regular weekly episode, but is in fact yet another bonus episode. I am thrilled this week to have a couple of returning guests. We've, of course, got Rugby Julia and Mr. Will Owen all here to join us for a special episode 2 preview the WXV. Will, Julia, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, we've waited for each other to speak. That's the first mistake we'll make today. Very well. It's all going to go downhill from here because me and Julia have a similar kind of stance on the absolute dread that is supporting the Welsh National Rugby Union team, particularly the women's team. So, yeah. Will,
how are you doing over there? Everything going okay? Did you ever track down that sheriff guy we always talk about?
No, he's still on the loose, that guy. Still looking for him. Bizarrely, he doesn't live anywhere between my house and the Squidge Rugby office. That's as far as I can tell. And Long Eaton Rugby Club. They're the 3 places I frequent. He doesn't live anywhere near any of those 3 places, so we'll have to keep searching.
Julia, how are you doing? Thank you for sharing some of your Labor Day with us here. It's good to spend Labor Day laboring. So,
absolutely. I'm coming to you live from the stairwell at Squidge Towers. They have kept me here all long weekend. I'm thrilled to finally see Will. Will, if you could just later, we'll talk about it later. Maybe when you're finding the guy.
Yeah.
Will, by the way, quick plug. Can you tell everyone about the podcast that you and your brother have just started back up? Because I know, for instance, I have been listening already.
Yeah, so we do this terrible podcast where we talk about every Rugby World Cup game ever. And it seemed like a great idea when we started it about 4 years ago. And then a few people listened and we were like, okay, that's a bit weird. Because we went through every game of the 2011 Rugby World Cup because we quite liked that World Cup. And then we were like, wouldn't it be funny if we did 1987 next? So we then did that, watched every game of that. And it was shit. Then we went to 2007, which was decent, but still getting more and more niche. And now we've gone on to 2014, which is the first women's tournament that we've covered. We're going to do every game that we have access to. Some of the, annoyingly, we don't yet have access to the 11th place qualifier and the 9th place qualifier and all those other really important games that but the thing is, I mockingly say that, but we actually love doing that kind of thing on the podcast because it's about niche, terrible rugby games that no one cares about. So we want those games. So if anyone's listening that has access to those games, please let us know. But yeah, we're doing 2014 Rugby World Cup. We're currently a couple of episodes in, looking to cover every single game of that, which is a lot of fun. As I say, it's good to cover the version of rugby with less men in it for a change. So yeah.
Well, spoiler alert, Kazakhstan do go down to New Zealand, but it was close, right?
Yeah, it was close. There was only about 68 points in it. Yeah.
It's not like it was the U.S. playing the All Blacks or anything. Oh, geez.
I was just going to say, that's not the worst scoreline we've ever seen. Let's give them a little bit of...
Well, I've asked you both here to discuss the upcoming tournament that we're all very excited for, I think. The WXV, which, of course, stands for Women, Excellence and Values. Wait, do I have that right? Am I allowed to just make stuff up?
Yeah, rugby values.
That really explains it. Why a lot of people have been asking me online why it's WXV, or assuming it was just women's XV, but I think it is really women's excellent value.
Yeah, see, they should really hire me. Branding in no time. I had one of my first ever jobs was at a restaurant, and they wanted to make sure that the menu that they were just about to print at all this really high cost was correct. So they had every single person who worked there, including the busboy, me, just look it over. And the first thing I noticed was that whenever they use the word extra, instead of extra, they put X-TRA, which doesn't actually save any room. It's the same number of characters. And then the other thing they had was duck a la orange. And I was like, guys, it's not duck a la orange, it's a l'orange. And they go, nobody's going to know that. And I was like, well, I knew that, and I'm the bus boy. So
Maybe it's women's extra value.
Yes, extra value, exactly. It fits. So switching back to actual facts, quoting here from the official website, the WXV returns in September and October 2024 with Canada, South Africa, and Dubai hosting the best of the best in women's international rugby. With the added excitement of 6 Women's Rugby World Cup, England 2025 places up for grabs. That's an awkward sentence. The action promises to be compelling. This year's tournament will kick off earlier to support performance planning and best preparation for unions for Women's Rugby World Cup 2025. All 3 levels will play across the same 3 weekends to enable the 6 qualification spots to be confirmed immediately after the conclusion of the tournament, unquote. Julia, on a scale of Catherine Treader to Gabby Cantorna, how excited are you for the return of this competition?
Why would Catherine Treader be on the low end? I'm excited, and it's funny that you named like 2 of my absolute favorite players. I am super stoked. It's funny that you had mentioned, or that they had mentioned rather, that it was to make sure that everybody was getting the right prep in, everybody was on the same kind of level. And I've spent all morning trying to find Wales's preparation to see if they were prepared. So almost everybody is prepared. Some people may not be prepared.
Ironically, that you mentioned it, Will, your brother Squidge just posted something about an hour ago on the Twitters. He said the Welsh Rugby Union women are playing Scotland on Friday evening, and they haven't acknowledged the game, announced a squad, published where we can watch it, had a player coach up for media, literally anything. It feels like how teams treat their women's sides decades ago. I think Julia's already chimed in on that one. Is that hard agree for you there, Will?
Well, I was going to say great quote tweet in that tweet too, if you check it out.
Oh, yes, there's a response by somebody. I don't know who she is.
He was responding to it, but it's just...
Oh, is that right? Okay, I came to it late.
Yeah, hard agree. It's so frustrating that Wales are playing their closest rivals, I would say, in either the men's or women's game. I don't think there's a rivalry at the moment because, let's face it, the men's team aren't close to England and haven't been for a couple of years. So there's not really a rivalry in Welsh rugby that's bigger than the Wales versus Scotland in the women's. And to be honest, I was thinking earlier, there's not many bigger rivalries in women's rugby full stop than this. I'd argue that because England versus France is a big one because they play like 1,000 times a year, but also England win
and New Zealand.
All of those. England, New Zealand is the other one because, you know, there is kind of that grudge match kind of thing with the World Cup finals every 4 years being between those two. So I kind of feel like if not for the fact that that's just like a slightly higher standard, it maybe is like pound for pound the biggest rivalry in international women's rugby. And yeah, it's not been spoken about at all. Well, they've put out one tweet now, which is great. You know, it's better than it was beforehand.
Does it say, sorry, we haven't actually let anyone know about this, and that's it?
Well, yeah, if you're talking about the one from earlier today, actually, that Robbie sent me because I didn't even see it because it was so close to this time. I was getting ready for chatting with you guys. And they still, by the way, barely mentioned the Scotland game. And I understand that it's because it's being held in Scotland. And we were all talking right before I got on to talk to you guys about whether or not you could actually watch it. But they also haven't made that public at all. And I understand like BBC is different, whether you're in Wales, in England, or in Scotland. Yeah. But I think generally if it's on BBC and you're on that island, you can get it. But no. Not a thing.
Here you need that little converter you plug in. I think it's a metric thing.
But yeah, it would be nice to have some sort of clarity on where we can watch that, if we can watch it. As I say, it's one of the biggest games in the Welsh Rugby calendar all year. It's the start of the season. It's the perfect opportunity to get people watching the games. And yeah, it's a massive day for Wales after having just qualified for WXV2. And it's a huge opportunity to put a marker down ahead of next year's Six Nations. And yeah, it's not being spoken about. You know, could you imagine that? Like, it's so much more important, like tenfold more important than the Welsh men's tour to Australia that happened before. Which who really cared about that? And even more pointless than that was the South Africa test that was played at Twickenham just before that by the men, and that was just South Africa just pumping Wales centrals in essentially like a training run, you know. And yeah, that got loads of coverage, as it should, because it's international rugby, international professional rugby. And yeah, this is the exact same situation, but because the players are female, we do not know what's going on. It's really frustrating.
Is it just pure sort of thoughtlessness, or it almost feels malicious? It almost feels like, ha ha ha, we're not going to do this for them. Like, but it can't be that, right? It's got to just be neglect and like stupidity.
I saw it. Well, I saw an interesting thought from a friend online, but it was, really close to coming up here, so I don't even know what else she said since. But I know something about Whisper Cymru is in charge of something about the WRU and the publicity that they do. And since they've been working on the Paralympics, maybe they're working on that and they haven't been paying attention to the women's at all. And this is just guessing, of course, nobody actually knows. That was one thing that I read, but even still, the fact remains that like scheduling tweets has existed for like a long time. You could make a few, and it isn't. I don't think that I'm not going to give them the credit that it's like a surprise that you're playing this game. This game has been scheduled for a while. It's the fact that it's not a ranking game. Like, okay. Again, like Will just said, like they've been covering friendlies elsewhere for men plenty. I don't think that's the issue. I do think it's apathy or what I worry about more, which we may or may not get into, that it's like a lack of preparation or I mean, it's either apathy or lack of awareness, lack of preparation. I'm really worried. I'm really worried maybe they don't have a roster yet.
An unpaid intern would be happy to post these things online. You could get somebody and be like, hey, guess what? For your resume, you get to say you are social,
They've got tons of junior analysts. Every governing body does. Like, there are a bunch of younger people who are wandering around and know how to use Twitter and could like drop a little one that's just like, hey, we're excited. Here is one picture of them at the gym. Anything, because we look at something like Scotland. It just so happens that that's who we're playing. But Scotland has really shown Wales up. Somebody counted that it has been over 10 posts about this specific Wales game. The roster is up. There has been countless footage of both on and off training pitch for the team. There's all the excitement of a regular test match. And for Wales, I genuinely don't know who will be playing. I don't know who's fit.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
It's really, like, the best case scenario is, let's say that team are off at the Paralympics, right? At which point somebody in charge of the WRU media or whatever just goes, okay, fine, we need to plan ahead for that. We've got this massive test match against Scotland on the Friday night. Let's just get somebody else to tweet something about this. It's not hard. It's not going to be hard to promote because, it's a massive grudge match. It's a massive test against two close rivals. Look, Scotland, I feel like low-key hate Wales, because of the tournament.
It's a great rivalry. I understand that it's not like two giant hitters, but it's a good rivalry, and women's rugby only has a few.
The 2022 and 23 Six Nations really riled Scotland up. Like Rachel Malcolm, who is
she talks about it all the
one
time.
of the nicest people in rugby, goes on about how much that pissed Scotland off. And can we use that against it? Like Rachel Malcolm, funny enough, on her Instagram story early today was posting stuff about her training, and how ready they are for the game on Friday. Whereas from Wales' perspective, all I've seen is one photo that Alex Callender put on her Instagram story the other day of her in Wales training kit. So she's in camp. That's great news. And Kate Williams sharing something saying that she's going to South Africa in a couple of weeks with Abby Fleming and Lisa Neumann. And that's all I've seen personally, and that's on the players' personal Instagram stories. That's nothing that the media's put out, nothing that the unions put out, nothing.
Which, by the way, if you want those middle-aged men that are always packing out cap and everything, they aren't on Instagram. They're not reading his Instagram stories. We're reading them because we're major fans, but we're not the ones that you need to be bringing in as viewers.
Right.
We're going to be viewing it anyway.
Exactly.
I just find this very hard to reconcile with. And I know that it's past now and we need to move on from it, but with the entire WRU performance in the last Six Nations of how badly I feel their team was just failed. Yeah. And instead of coming out the blocks firing, instead of saying truly this time, tune into WXV. Yeah. Another great thing about being in WXV2 for Wales is that it's going to be a very good time zone to watch it in Wales or in the UK at all. That's great. You don't get that a lot in rugby. There's so many reasons to watch this tournament, and they're giving the Welsh and then greater rugby fan public no reason.
Well, I want to circle. Oh, sorry. I want to circle back to Wales in a little bit because, you already mentioned that they qualified for the second tier in there. Julia, you and I started talking right around the time they had that big win against Spain. Exactly. I think right at the end of June. But anyway, I want to circle back to them. The WXV won this year. We've got some serious heavy hitters: Canada, England, France, Ireland, New Zealand, and the USA. Will, does that that list look right to you? Like if you were just out of the blue making a list of the top 6 teams, would this be it?
I think so. Well, broadly at the moment, I think Ireland's a really difficult one to quantify because they had a really good situations, but you wonder, is that a justification of how good a tournament they had or how good a team they actually are? And I think, to be honest, this is the perfect test for them because they're in exactly the same position that Wales were in last year, where Wales had a brilliant Six Nations. And I think we as Welsh fans simply all thought, oh my God, we're an amazing team. And we went there, got properly humbled and realised like, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. Maybe we just had 1 or 2 really good campaigns. I think Ireland are going to find out where exactly on that scale they are. I think their test against the USA will be massive to see where both those are, because the USA, I think, do deserve to be up there. And the USA are one of those teams where, Julia, you'll know much better than me, but I feel like they are both like equally as capable of a really underwhelming performance as a massive upset against a big hitter. So it's going to be really difficult to see where they are, but it's a huge building block for them.
Julia, same question basically. Are these the top 6 teams you would have picked? Ireland does seem like the head scratcher, only because of where they were. 13 months ago they were shambolic, and then all of a sudden there's somebody completely new. Like Will said, which is the real Ireland?
So actually, along those lines, basically, I feel the same way. I am really curious about Ireland because I do think. I want to root for them. They're a great team. They've also had like an absolute shit go of it in the past few years. So has Wales. And I worry because I do think about what happened with Wales last time. It is true that they got a lot of experience. I don't necessarily know that getting smashed into the ground for 3 weeks really helped them. Some of them came out after and talked about it. It was just like, we learned a lot. We learned about where we are in the pecking order. But, at the end of the day, they turned around and had a disastrous Six Nations. I don't know necessarily that getting humbled is really where women's teams grow right now. But that said, these are the teams that they are. I am most excited about USA, honestly. I'm worried because I do think that of all the teams, it's definitely going to be Ireland and USA having the hardest times. But I am very curious to see how we play against Ireland. I think that's going to be the big one.
Will, this is an interesting thing that Julia and I have already talked about in the past. Like, so leading up to the Olympics, there was the announcement that Ellie Kildun she kind of said, you know what, maybe I'll show up and play for the GB7s. And a lot of people, my first reaction was, yes, more Ellie Kildun. I love watching her. That's great. And Julia kind of pointed out, well, wait a sec. What if you're one of the people in that squad that's been working their ass off all year, and then somebody just kind of says, you know what, I'm going to play. And suddenly your spot is gone. As it turned out, I actually think it was a mistake, including her. I think she actually kind of hurt their results a little bit. And now we have a similar question with Ilona Maher, who's kind of done the same thing, where she's like, you know what, maybe she didn't really say it as casually. She wasn't like, I guess I'll play with them. She's like, I'm going to work hard to make this team. Is that good for USA Rugby, Will? Is it the profile she'll bring is so enormous, but is that unfair to just kind of shove somebody aside?
It's a good question. I think your assessment of Kildun is spot on. That, it puts somebody to a side, but at the same time, it's their job to try and just win the games. And if they think they'd win the games, they're more likely to win the games with Ellie Kildun playing. Look what happened in the men's team with Antoine Dupont playing. And the thing that's easy to forget is she is also like, they've also worked their asses off since they were kids as well to become the best rugby players in their kind of gender division. Just they were doing it in a 15-a-side format rather than the 7-a-side format. But yeah, like Kildun was pretty underwhelming at the Olympics for what a great player she is.
I think the skill set she brought was not correct for what they were trying to accomplish.
Absolutely that. With Ilona Maher, I mean, it's a good thing that she said this a year out from the World Cup rather than like 3 weeks beforehand, just assuming that she would make the team kind of thing, because she would definitely know how much hard work that's going to take. That you look at the USA 15-a-side team, if she's going to play as a centre, which a lot of people are speculating she will, like she would have to oust Alef Kelter out of that team, or at least try and get into a centre partnership with it, which isn't an easy job, talking about a legend of the 15s and 7s as well, game in the USA. And I know that she's not getting any younger, but, she's still just as good a player as she's always been. So it would be a great thing for women's rugby if Ilona Maher did make it there, but also it's not the obligation of the USA management and selection panel to get her in there because it's good for the game. They have to pick the team that they think is going to win. And truthfully, we don't know until we've seen her playing 15-a-side rugby. I don't know where she's going to do it at club level. I don't know if the women's setup in the MLR might be where she starts out, and see if anybody in the PWR wants to pick her up, because that's realistically the only place other than France where she can go and actually develop. I don't know. Julie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do, and I have been having this exact conversation a few places, and David and I have talked about it as well. So I am of two minds. Of course, Alon Mar is great. She's also a very good rugby player. I would like to remind people that she is a very good sevens player. We haven't seen her play 15s. She has 2 caps on the wing from 2021. I can't say I went back and looked at. Right. And I went back and I went back and looked at those matches, and she played okay. She wasn't some breakout star. She certainly wasn't Ellie Kildunn. That's fine. Other than that, she hasn't played since college, which is a long, I feel bad that I don't have it on hand. I think she's 28, but it definitely wasn't recent. And that concerns me. You did point out Alev Kelter, which is the one that I would put in at 12 right now. But even still, my other part of it is I don't feel that Instagram followers or like being really popular makes your rugby team good. That's awesome. And I absolutely want to get eyes on it. I want the game to grow in America. First of all, 15s and 7s are 2 different crowds, but even still, growing the game is incredibly important. She's also a very good rugby player. There's no reason she shouldn't try for this. That said, I personally feel if she really wants to get on that track right now, she needs to sign for a PWR team right now. Or unfortunately, the only other place that I could see her being right now is in the WPL, which is the Women's Premier League here in America. I would love it, as like Will said, I would love it if she ends up in the WER, which is the new professional rework of the WPL. WER is going to be a pro league. It's going to be, it should be great. I'm not sure which team she would play with, but I'm sure any of them would take her. That said, it won't be starting till 2025, and I think that would be way too late. Yeah. I think if you want to get your 15 skills up because we're not talking about she would like to make the next Pac-4 team. That's one thing. She's saying she'd like to be there for the World Cup. Yeah. And that's basically parachuting in unless you have like some 15s behind you. I think about somebody like Jazz Joyce. I think about somebody like Meg Jones. And while they are people who jump back and forth between codes, first of all, it takes a huge toll on their bodies. And second of all, those kinds of players have many more years of experience in both codes than she does. And I can say this because I'm a huge Jazz Joyce fan in general. I will say that it often denigrates one of the 2 codes when she switches between. There's always a crossover period of readjusting. Yeah. So I guess in conclusion, if she wants to, I think she can, but she'd have to start now. And the money and the publicity stuff right now is great. We have wanted it forever. If you could be a superstar, great. But you can't do both, I don't think. I think that's what they want Ellie. They want for Ellie Kildunn. They were trying very hard. They're pushing very hard to make Ellie Kildunn. They want her to be like the Caitlin Clark of football or of rugby. And that's great, but it doesn't make you good at rugby.
If Alona Mar signs with Bristol, will we just find your corpse on your floor with an exploded head?
That would be fantastic. She has never mentioned Bristol. No, honestly, I do think if she does somehow make it to the PWR, I think it'll be Saracens. Saracens have always had a strong connection with American high performance. The coach before the one that we have now was an old Saracens guy. Alev Kelter played at Saracens. I think that's probably where it would end up. It looks like they're signing some Olympians right now.
They seem like the team with the most money outside of Gloucester Hartpury, don't they? And Gloucester Hartpury have too many players. As much as I love them, they have too many good players. They've got too many.
The deck is a little stacked.
Well, Americans also, and I hate to say that if it were me, if I were still fit and if I were going to get an offer, I would hope that it would be Bristol because that's the team that I like. But in terms of an American who maybe doesn't follow PWR that much or just like will take whatever they get, they want London.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the WXV2 this year, we're looking at Australia, Italy, Japan, Scotland, South Africa, and Wales. We already alluded to it. Wales kind of, I don't want to say snuck in, but just managed to get in after that win over Spain. I think it was 52-20, 52-30, something like that.
Yeah.
How bad would it have been for Wales if they hadn't actually made that? If they hadn't gotten that win over Spain and they were in WXV3, would that just be a massive setback for them?
What a loaded question, David Lawrence. Okay.
I don't know if listeners could see, but I just like blanched.
yeah. The two of us just suddenly our faces dropped, just thinking about. For context, when that Spain game was going on, that was whilst I was at Glastonbury. And I was in a crowd just desperately like trying to get signal because
and we were DMing him,
had no access to any internet, couldn't access the game. And I was literally asking strangers around me, "Hi, can you check the BBC Sport to see the Wales versus Spain score?" Eventually, one of my friends managed to get signal. And it was funny because later that day, England played in the football, like in the Euros, and won. And like a massive cheer went up in the crowd when they scored. And it was just like, okay, this is how I felt on my own when I found out that Gareth Bale had scored 10 minutes in. But yeah, that was a horrible thing for me because I found out that we were fighting like 7-0 up. Then the next update I got was like we're like 40 points up. And it's like, oh my god, it's fine, it's going to be okay. But to answer your question properly, it would have been a massive step down for Wales. I think it would have meant playing in WXV3 would have felt like an acceptance that the standard we were playing at the Six Nations is just the standard that we are now. Whereas in WXV, we being Wales, sorry, I'm biased. Get over it. I'm just a fan. Look, I have no obligation to be unbiased when it comes to the Welsh women's team. When it comes to the Welsh men's team, I'll be completely impartial. When it comes to the women's team, I'm sorry. There's no stopping me.
Julie and I talked about this before, that it's like, how many we's do we have? Because I'm we when it's the USA Eagles. I'm we when it's Scotland. I'm we when it's the Free Jacks. I mean,
I was going to say, and my we is hardest literally when I am talking to Will Owen. That's the hardest one because he's one of the only like major men's commentators who also cares a lot about women and knows I'm American.
Yeah,
Hard to be all three.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, men's rugby's a side hustle, but you know, it has to be done sometimes. You've got to pay the bills, haven't you?
Got to pay the bills, exactly.
Anyway, so yeah, WXV2 will be a good but realistic challenge for Wales. I feel like WXV3, I think the majority of those games, Wales would have been expected to just put 80 points on them in, again, like essentially a training run. I think Spain would have been a difficult game again for Wales, like doing that again, but obviously we know how that went in the summer. But there's a couple of games there that Wales maybe would have struggled in, but still won. WXV2 is a really interesting one because it's been a long time since we officially played South Africa in a test match. Who else are we looking at other than Scotland, Italy?
Japan, Italy, and Australia.
Like
Japan has been making a lot of strides. It's just that we don't see it a lot and talk about it because the English language coverage is a bit harder for the women. But truly, Japan is not going to be a walkover. I really want to caution Wales fans off that. It's not going to be as easy as it once was.
That's the biggest mystery in this group for me is probably Australia. I feel like I know their sevens team inside and out, top to bottom. I have no idea what to expect from their 15s.
So much to talk about with Australia.
They're another one that I think are kind of generating a rivalry with Wales. Japan, as you say, like is a good test because Wales will go in expected to win, but with no guarantee, which is a good position to be in. You have to learn to be a good team. You have to learn how to go into games as favourites and come out on top. With Australia, again, like what I was saying about Rachel Malcolm in Scotland earlier, Wales should really have taken that loss to Australia in WXV1 last year personally. That should be something that they're just like, this does not happen again, because Wales had done everything right to win that game and blew it at the last second. So that has to be the real target on Australia's back. They've got the home game, the warm-up game in Newport coming up, and then the game in WXV, and that has to be aimed to they do not come to Wales and win. You have to just really put a marker down there, just like there is no circumstance in which they win that game. And take it personally, make them another rival, just like Scotland. I think they're on a really similar level to Wales, but then again, like at the same time, like look at games they've had recently against the Black Ferns that they can't be taken for granted. But that's I think the absolute ceiling that Wales can reach at the moment, realistically, is beating Australia.
I was going to say, critically, from the other side, Australia is looking at a recent loss to the USA that devastated them. They also have a fantastic, I mean, I know I've talked about Joe Yap a lot, fantastic coach. They have all of the building blocks to be great. We're not sure really why they've fallen the way that they have recently, but something in my gut says that they're still not done. And if anything, they do like to right a wrong. I think it will be very good. I hope that they see Wales as a rival the way that Wales sees them should see them as a rival. I think that'd be a really healthy one. And I think that would raise the standard for Wales, which is what they need right now.
So I might actually be most excited about the WXV 3, mostly because I've just never seen some of these teams at all. So we're looking at Fiji, Hong Kong, China. The Hong Kong, China, by the way, their sevens program is already just making leaps and bounds. But Madagascar, Netherlands, Samoa, and Spain. Like, Will, is there a team on that list you've never seen before? Because I've got.
I've never seen Netherlands play. I've seen the rest of them play very little. I think I've seen Spain play quite a bit. I've seen Fiji largely in the last World Cup. Hong Kong, literally WXV last year. Samoa, WXV last year. Madagascar are unavoidable because they're great and they drag in like incredible crowds of like 50,000 people to watch.
I love that.
Never seen the Netherlands though.
Julia, are you on the verge of becoming an expert on rugby in Madagascar?
I really hope so. I've been a really big fan actually for a little bit longer, just because in the smaller kind of women's rugby media circle, we have definitely been knowing about the insane crowds that they've been pulling, but also rugby for women in Africa has taken a sharp turn up, which is great. But they're seeing countries like Uganda, like Cameroon, like Madagascar mostly, that are really trying to come up, and they're really trying to make something out of that Rugby Africa Cup. In terms of how they're going to do in WXV3, I don't think it's going to be overwhelmingly successful. I think it's going to be extremely important for Madagascar rugby, because this will be the first time that they've played, I think, outside of, I guess they've probably traveled to the mainland, but they've definitely never played outside of Africa. So the travel alone and learning how to be an elite team and seeing what it's like living that life, I'm worried for the same reasons that I always am for for places like Fiji and Samoa, that I'm worried about how much their governing bodies can give them in terms of money and infrastructure and support. But that said, there has been so much need for exposing teams at that level that could have a breakthrough in a few years, exposing them, before they get to that level, because I do think in this case, they're going to get shocked a lot. But I think this is the kind of situation where you can learn a lot, because these are the teams that I think are their next level. And I think that can pull them up like that. I hope that I become an expert on it. Madagascar is awesome. The culture is fantastic. I think the rugby community will enjoy watching them. And I hope that it gets more eyes on them when they go back home.
I have a question for both or either of you, because both of you have played. Like the phrase you hear a lot from rugby players, probably all sports, but I hear it a lot in rugby, is steel sharpens steel. In order to get better, you need to be against the toughest competition. But we also kind of hinted earlier, like there's such a thing as getting your ass kicked and just getting humbled, I think was the word you used. And like that's never good for you. So where does that line fall? What is a good way for Madagascar to lose all their games and still get better, as opposed to just being like, oh crap, we just got our asses handed to us? But how do you know where that line is?
That's a good question. I think that you have to not necessarily judge it on score lines, considering this is international. You have to not just judge it on score lines, but how quickly they adapt to that standard, if that makes sense. Like, you recently mentioned the kind of the New Zealand Kazakhstan thing we did in 2014, and sometimes you can see a game where the opposition win by 70 points, but you will have moments where you've made a hit on a world-class player, or they're playing at real speed that you can't actually realistically live with, and yet they've not scored. So a lot of that is kind of like you have to mentally reflect on that kind of thing and go, how much can we make this opposition look human? Because sometimes when let's say you're the Netherlands and you've never played this level, and you're playing against Spain, who've been playing major international tournaments for decades now, realistically, you're going to pride yourself more on, for example, like knock-ons that you're making them make, rather than necessarily you scoring a try, because one of those is much more realistic and much more achievable than the other, even if it's not tangibly mentioned on the scoreboard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Julia, what about the other sort of side of that coin? Like, when is it not good for the team that's doing the ass kicking? Like, if you just go out and run up 70 points on every team you face, is that also bad for your program?
Well, sure. I mean, I understand how it could look on its face like it's detrimental to your program. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe Spain, maybe Netherlands. Honestly, the Netherlands are pretty good. They're just not as good as Spain, so you don't see them internationally a lot because Spain always beat them out for qualification spots. But back to people like Madagascar. I'm not really sure. That is a good question. I think it is more like what Will said, managing your loss, improving your performance each time. It really is the little things that you can do. Learning that the big ones really are like putting defensive pressure on a completely dominant opposition, being able to make big tackles. I'm trying to think of somebody amazing. Okay, I don't even know if Madagascar is playing Spain. I should probably know that. Oh, they're in different pools. Probably not. Hypothetically, Madagascar trying to make a hit on Bimba on Spain. It's going to be hard. She's been playing in the PWR. She's very skilled. If you can get to that point where you can do that, that is a win. I also don't think it would be very detrimental to a team like, in my hypothetical, like a team like Spain, because you're still coming up against something that perhaps you haven't played against. The big thing that I like about WXV3 is that we're going to see different styles, because this really is the global pool of all three of them. And in that way, I think there could be a lot of learning on both sides of any matchup. And you take from it how well you are coached dictates what you take from it. Learning that there are more important aspects than the scoreline. Yeah. And of course, teaching your players how to take a hard loss. It's always hard, especially when you play for a team that lacks resources or you haven't had the exposure. It's going to suck and it is going to be disheartening. But if you are of the rugby values heart, I think you'll be able to take something from it. In terms of what they learn, we'll see you next time in Rugby Africa Cup.
Will, in the WXV3, do you have a few players that you're just sitting at home going, "Ooh, I can't wait to see her in action," or is it a full team that you can't wait to see in action? What are some sort of highlights you're anticipating enjoying?
If I were to pick one player, I'd say Donu plays for Fiji, who is an absolute baller. It's kind of just like if you were asked to draw up like a stereotype of a Fijian rugby player. It's just like, okay, she's got unbelievable feet, an incredible offload, is insanely strong. Just, you mentioned earlier, Julia, like a lot of rugby players have that real struggle flitting between 7s and 15s. She doesn't. She just walks in and she's just like plays like she's just down the park with her mates, holds the ball like a coconut, which, is always great when you come across players
very
like
Fijian,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, she's just ludicrous. So she's definitely one to keep an eye out on.
What about you, Julia? Same question. Is there a player or maybe a team, maybe a coach that you're like, "Ooh, I can't wait to see how this goes"?
Unfortunately, I did just use it, and I will say it, and it is kind of a cop-out one for like major women's rugby heads, because my answer is Laura Delgado, who is now the captain of Spain. I'm really more excited just because I think she's a great leader. I follow her I follow her on socials. She is a prop. She now makes these fantastic Spanish language kind of like how to prop videos and tells you all the techniques or whatever. But when you watch her with her teammates who she uses as her props in her teaching, the way that she leads is really exciting to me. I understand that in WXV3, yes, Spain is going to be one of the strongest ones, so it's not like they need my help. But they are a team that has also gotten kicked in the teeth a lot when they are down. They can also use some good news. They know that they are in for some good news here. But I am really interested to see the progress that they have made since the Spanish Rugby Union has at least pretended or on their face looks like they're finally taking it seriously and actually care about their women's program. If anybody else, Spain definitely deserves it.
Julia, what do you think is going to be the final pecking order when the dust settles on the WXV3?
I do think the top is going to end up. I don't remember if they ever end up playing cross pool, but if they do, it'd be Spain and Netherlands. I'm really interested to see what Hong Kong China brings for 15s, because we know how they're doing in 7s, which means they may have a really great training program being born right now. And if so, that would be fantastic, because there really need to be more challengers in that Southeast Asia area. But yeah, Fiji is definitely in there as well. I'd be interested to see how Fiji and Spain play as well. I'm more curious to hear what Will thinks, because I'm just going on about all the games I'm happy about.
Yeah, I think I'm mostly in agreement with you. I think Spain have to go in as favourites.
Yeah.
Fiji are one that you'd be foolish to take your eyes off. Dark horse in there, I think, is Samoa. That they really coped in WXV2 last year, and I feel like this might be a really good opportunity for them to show that they're up to that standard. So they're the dark horse in that pool.
That is a really good point, actually. I forgot about that switch, and it could be really good news for Samoa, because they are another one that maybe not necessarily the same as Fiji, but they're certainly on the cusp of something.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see where it goes. I'm really hoping that the performances of both of those, of both Samoa and Fiji, maybe pushes Oceania Rugby to improve what they are doing right now, so that those teams can thrive, is what I'll say.
Well, I think it's going to be a little easier of a question to ask. I'm guessing that both of you have a couple players in the WXV2 that you might be thinking about. Oh, gee, I guess I wouldn't mind watching her coming soon. Do either of you have players not on Wales who you're particularly looking forward to in the second tier?
There are players not on Wales. Oh my god!
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mentioned it.
At this time, we don't really know which of the Welsh players will be at WXV2, so we don't really know.
What I would rephrase that question to is which players I'm dreading rather than which players I'm excited.
Yes, please.
I think after the Six Nations, I'm really, really dreading Emma Orr playing against Wales.
Yes.
That was where I was going. I was saying her, Alex Stewart. I just don't.
Yes, Alex Stewart's crazy levels of good, and she's only 19. She's probably 20
and not when
now.
I was going to say, and not when she's with Rachel Malcolm and Jade Conkle, who's healthy now. No, I don't want any of that. No.
Oh man, we're playing Scotland on Friday.
No.
It's all going to go badly.
Anyway,
nobody knows for sure if that's happening.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't worry.
Emma Orr's one of those players who everybody always said, like, everyone who's like trained with her or anything said like she's exceptional, she's world class. Like, and I always for a long time watched her and thought like she's good, but she's not amazing. And then you see her play against like smaller teams, like with less good defenders, and you see her and you're like, oh, she's incredible. And then it turns out Wales are one of those smaller teams with less good. No, I'm joking. But in the Six Nations, she genuinely did look exceptional against every opposition she came up against. And like even like against France, she was cutting through them constantly. And you're looking at her and go, "Oh no, it's happening. She's the real deal." So
she has the added accolade that one time I was watching her, and my son just kind of walked by and he looked at her name on the screen and said, "Ooh, Emma Orr. That's a cool name." I was like, "Yeah, it is." I feel like anyone he anoints like that is automatically going to be excellent.
Good. Future Bears fan.
Yes. Julia, what about you? Who are you dreading seeing? I like this angle much better than the one I had.
Well, that really was it. Alex Stewart, especially coming from for two. I am a Wales fan, and thinking about back row versus back row. Yeah, when I think about people who will challenge a back row like Wales, it is Scotland. In terms of who else, I love Babawalacha. On the Springboks, or the
Sezahele is playing. Oh no, we have to play against her.
Yeah. Sezahele is another one, actually. That's a great one. Since we're talking about people who make the back line a nightmare, or the back row a nightmare, rather. Those are the ones. Who else? I'm trying to think of who else is in two. Actually, I'm completely blanking.
I'm trying to think of Australian players. I don't know why I'm kind of hung up on them.
Okay, Eva Karpani.
Yeah.
There we go. I'm worried about her just mowing people over.
Yeah.
I'm always worried about Laurie Kramer, who is back to fitness. Let's see who else.
Georgie Fredericks is on really good form. She's a just impossibly balanced center, really quick, great offload game. She's brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic. And if Caitlin Leaney is healthy, which I think she is, that will be another one. They are just menacing in the pack in general. I guess I'm not as worried about their back row as everybody else, but I am just really interested. I feel like with the opportunity that having somebody like Joe Yap gives them, and whether it is just professed or actually real, the recommitment that they have made They're at least making a lot of splash, and like at least they're putting stuff online because Wales isn't. With what it looks like they are doing, I feel like we could see a much improved performance. I think it's not that great that I am saying could at this point, because I'm really not sure. We need to see like a much improved performance, but the potential is there.
I have a feeling, I'm going out on a limb here, but I have a feeling that both of you are Wales fans. Do you mind if I say that? What is success for Wales in this year's tournament? Are you going to take this whole tier? Are you going to win it all? It seems like they were, a hair's breadth away from being in the one tier lower, but can they still snatch it all? I don't know who's going to wrest it from them. I feel like Scotland and Wales could play each other 100 times and they'd each win 50 games.
Asking me what success is for Wales is like asking a blind man what outside looks like, It's
there's an allegory of the cave kind of thing we can get into.
Yeah, exactly that. So yeah, I don't know. I think again there are certain games that you like are must wins. Like Japan's a must win. Australia is a different kind of must win. I think beating Australia is a form of success for Wales, to be honest. And I actually think that I know it's a friendly, and I know that it might not be first, like starting 15s or whatever, but the Scotland game beforehand is like just as big as the actual WXV campaign itself. So I don't think Wales can realistically expect to finish kind of top two. On Wales playing Italy in this, is that right?
Damn it! I closed the browser with the schedule.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just put it down, but I do believe that Italy is the only rehash. Or no, so is Scotland.
Because usually it's just kind of Northern Hemisphere v Southern Hemisphere, but obviously it doesn't always work out like that.
It's supposed to be non-Six Nations matchups, but
but obviously after Wales beat Italy in the Six Nations, I think they have a real point to prove in that not just being like a one-off fluke kind of game,
which they would really need to prove considering how close it was.
Yeah, so I think beating them in Australia would be a massive, like, overwhelming success. But I think it's unlikely they'll do both. I think if they beat one, then they'll probably lose to the other, because Wales are in a position right now where they struggle to put two really solid performances together in a row. Usually it's kind of like you'll have one good performance and then you'll have one where it's just kind of like 15% off. So beating Australia would be a success, definitely.
By the way, I only now zoomed in enough on this window to see Will's title. I was like, wait a sec, he's got something funny enough,
actually. So for the listeners' sake, it underneath my thing on StreamYard just says men's rugby is shit, which funnily enough, when I just logged on to this, that was already on there. So whatever the last podcast I did on
long-held belief,
I put that on there. So I assume that was with our friends at Rock and Roll. That must have been because they use StreamYard. So I must have just ages ago done that on there, and just presumably with Patricia.
I was just going to say, Patricia, if you're listening, have me on, and I'm going to forget to do mine so that it'll say rugby cyberbully. But but she knows.
But I think that Rock and Roll now know to only book me if they say to me, "We will not make you talk about men's rugby." So I think that was what I will have done.
Hey.
I recently got on with Gav and Grav to talk about a movie instead of. It was one of the weirdest pods I've ever done, and it was fantastic.
Was it Invictus?
No, it was about
just a movie.
Oh, I'm forgetting the guy's name. There was like it's this guy he's a Welsh that, when you look him up, it says entertainer, not comedian outright. It says he's an entertainer and singer, and he went and joined the training camp for the Dallas Cowboys, and they made a little short film about it, and just to see how he managed to survive. It was utterly bizarre.
And they needed a token American.
Exactly. Well, they wanted somebody who would, know what it looks like when the Dallas Cowboys play. But
so they asked a guy from Boston.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they are America's team, or they were. Anyway, Julia, I don't think we got your answer about what would Wales call success this year. Can they win this whole slice of the tournament?
A whole slice of the tournament would be great, but I am again agreeing with Will and would go off of that. Yes, Australia would be the big one. Japan is must win, but Australia would be the big one. But I really would like to see 2 back-to-back wins. And I know that it sounds like I'm being facetious, but really, I really want to hammer what Will said because it's so true. And I wanted to just blurt out like it's a consistency thing, but we don't actually know because we have so many issues with injuries and we have issues with depth. They're doing some things to fix that, not to take away anything from them, but there are a lot of young players. They're getting blooded at sometimes really crucial games that sometimes hinder, sometimes help. But getting not only a consistent starting lineup, but a reliable, I don't know. It's hard to, even though in my mind I do compare it to the best. I look at England, I look at New Zealand, and it's like New Zealand has 3 Black Ferns teams that they could just pick whenever they want. Wales doesn't have that. It's true that their nearest rivals don't necessarily either, and I don't know why this is the case, but it seems like there is some personnel mismanagement that I'm hoping is being fixed behind the scenes. So to me, yeah, two back-to-back wins. It doesn't really matter against who, but the ability to regroup after a game, not lose your head, not get lost in like, we should or shouldn't win this game. Just go out, play 2 games of rugby, try not to ruin anybody's ACLs. That would be a win to me. I understand WXV is very important. We want to qualify for the World Cup, but also, I don't know. I feel like I have to be realistic.
That's a much better answer, actually. If Wales can, get a win against Japan with Sean Jones starting at 9, with Gwennon Hopkins playing at 8, and these guys get, a good 60, 70 minutes of starting rugby into the international level, that will go a long, long way for
That's
Wales.
exactly what I was thinking. Sean Jones was the first that I was thinking. Also, Gwennon Hopkins, several younger ones, and they're coming up, which is great because it means that the pathways are strengthening, which has been a bugbear for Wales for Wales women for a long time. If we could start seeing success with that, I feel like that can trickle down because for whatever reason, it seems like the WRU is run by a bunch of 13-year-old boys where they're just like, the last thing that happened is everything. So the last time we played a game, we won. So we're really good right now. And then they don't prepare. And then something like Ireland and the Six Nations happens where they're like, it's a walkover. We'll do fine. Can't ever happen again. I want lessons to be learned maybe above the girls' heads.
Yeah.
So in the it's funny. I don't even like saying the top tier because these things can change, and we're kind of all dancing around it. Like we don't know what these outcomes are actually going to be. But in the so-called top tier, the WXV 1, we got the heaviest hitters. Will, are the Red Roses just going to romp over everybody? Like New Zealand would have something to say about that probably, but the Red Roses just seem like an unstoppable force, and New Zealand not always as consistent.
Yeah, obviously the Red Roses have also booked the test match at Twickenham with the Black Ferns, so they've got to aim to do the double over them. You're right. New Zealand will have something to say about that. And again, they're one of those teams where when they're on it, they are absolutely on fire. They look unstoppable. But then again, they have lost games in the last 2 years. So I think that England have to go in as favourites, unfortunately. As much as I want to say it's somebody else, they do have to go in as favourites because no matter what squad they're picking, they're getting 50-point wins over everybody. And I don't think John Mitchell quite knows what his strongest starting 15 is yet, but I feel like he'll know it by the end of WXV 1. I think they've got to go in as favourites.
So I got to talk to Alice Soper a couple months ago, and we were talking about the last World Cup, and she mentioned her sort of hot take was it might have been better for New Zealand to not win that World Cup because then they could turn around and address some of the issues that she sees and strengthen the program, whereas winning it in that spectacular way allowed everyone to go, no problems here, nothing to see here, everything's fine, look, we just beat the best team, nobody has anything to complain about. Julie, do you think there's any truth to that?
Well, interesting. You and I, last time we talked about the same risk, but in terms of Canada and to a lesser extent, us here in the US, in terms of whether or not that is a risk. And we haven't really gotten enough data back since then, certainly not since the Olympics, to see whether or not that will actually happen. But it's certainly a risk. There is a penchant for some heads of governing bodies to indeed believe that, just like I had said with Wales, that our last performance is indicative of us. This is what happens. We're the best, all done. We would like to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that they wouldn't do that because, if it were the men's team, you would understand that your record is more than your last match. But I'm thinking still about what Will had said about John Mitchell. I feel the same way. I don't think he has settled on it. I saw a tweet earlier, and it was just the way that it was worded that tweaked this in my mind as well, that there have been 6 versions of the roster. First of all, it'd be great, again, Wales, if you could put out 1 version of the roster. But England has put out 6 versions of the roster since they've been in training camp, and they've lengthened it and shortened it. And I think we only just got the actual roster for what's coming up for their opening matches, their opening internationals, or I guess they're calling it the Vodafone series. Anyway,
I will not be calling it that.
I will not be calling it that. I'm just calling it like the random international. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah, whatever they are, there have been several iterations, which means that they are thinking about it. I don't think any of those players are inexperienced enough that it'll really matter. They'll still be a very good team. But I do think what Alice said definitely matters. And I think going further from that, I think just like any other team, the Black Ferns certainly won't like, well, they didn't win. No, they didn't win. Won't like having lost. And then also they lost to Canada. So they have a lot to prove. And they're the Black Ferns. So I do think England is probably the favorite. I don't think it's for sure that they're gonna take the Ferns.
So I'm not trying to just endlessly name drop, but one of my favorite all-time interviews was with Philippa Tuttiett, and I asked her a similar thing about we were talking about the success Canada had found in the World Cup, and I was saying, is it worrisome that they're doing so well without being professional? Because doesn't this give their governing body the ability to say, why should we throw money at something that's already working? And her answer was like, absolutely not. What it will show them is, look how good you are now. And guess what? How good you could be if you actually threw some money at it will become so obvious that it'll become unavoidable. I haven't seen that transpire yet.
That's what I was going to say, is that a thing that I love about Philippa is that she's very much a rugby optimist. Sometimes I feel a little unrealistically, but that's the dream, right? That's what you hope the message they're getting is. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Will.
I didn't say anything. It's so good. So good. You carry on.
Yeah, no, we simply don't have any proof that it is driving like tons of investment. We saw the one thing that we've seen that I can point to is the USA getting the bronze medal, and then somebody completely unrelated to rugby dropped more money on them than USA Rugby was willing to.
Yeah.
I don't think we can give governing bodies that much credit yet, because absolutely none of them have put up, not even the Black Ferns. NZRU hasn't. You would think with the performance and the prestige and the tradition of rugby in New Zealand, you would think that they would be pouring it on to make sure that New Zealand, next time they see England, will destroy them. We haven't seen anything like that.
Will, this is a bit of an odd one, but is it unfair in a way, like the fact that Canada have been doing so well without being, getting the resources that some of these other teams have, it kind of adds to their charm, doesn't it? Make you want them to succeed more? Aren't you like, yeah, Canada, like, because they're just inherently financially underdogs. It makes you like, every time they do something good, it's like, yes. If they suddenly became the most well-funded team in the world, would it be like, oh well, yeah, Canada?
100%. I love watching them play. I think that also I think it would kind of prove a point to Rugby Canada a little bit, because they've made such a hash of their men's team, and still continue to prioritize them, which I know that men's rugby is a bigger sport, and I know that it gains more revenue generally around the world. However, women's rugby is the biggest contact sport, like collision sport, let's say a team sport in Canada, right? Because, fans, I'm stealing a point that my brother makes in an upcoming podcast.
Were you talking about America or Canada? For Canada, it's hockey, but close.
Oh, of course. Okay, fair enough.
But for US, absolutely.
Yeah. But point is, it's still a massive gap in the market, right? That it's a massive female collision sport. Yeah, let's use that term again. In Canada, if you're not into hockey, great. What else can you be into? If you're, American football fan or whatever. Again, I'm stealing a point that my brother makes on an upcoming podcast. But the best sport, most convenient sport that you can get into is rugby. And so I kind of think that if the women's team were really successful over teams that are pumping money in, like England, England being like basically the one team who are doing this correctly, one union that are doing this correctly, I should say, then that would be massive for the sport. And it's really weird. I can never explain this, but the way that the Canada women's team play rugby looks different from everybody else. And I love it. It's really entertaining. And I can't explain exactly what the difference is.
That's what I meant by the different rugby styles. It really is fun to watch. If you watch enough of it, you see the different ways of play. I'd say we also, USA is a little bit different, definitely to European or Australian, New Zealand rugby. But I think it blindsides them. And I think Canada, I wish Canada knew how much they were sitting on. I wish they knew how much a little investment would likely go an extremely long way. Luckily, now we're about to probably have a good case study out of this new inundation of money for USA women's rugby. I'm guessing it's probably going to end up paying dividends. I think it's probably going to end up doing something good. And I'm hoping that just because, and I complain about it usually, but it is in this case good that the rest of the world in general, not just in rugby, is like sick of America and doesn't want to hear from them. Great. Do better. Give your women $5 million. I don't mind. No, beat us at whatever you can. If it will make your women's rugby team better, great.
I am wondering, Julia, you and I talked about, we went on and on about the Olympic success. I'm still buzzing from that final game. Like the number of times I've watched the Spiff breakaway, it's completely ridiculous. I think I watched it twice yesterday. But we talked about how it's time to, I think I used the phrase strike while the iron's hot. Yes. Does that translate at all to a competition like this? Are the people who were gung-ho during the Olympics saying, hey, what's this WXV thing? Can I start watching this now? Or are these two sports too different for it actually to translate?
If you're asking me, it is what I worry about, especially when we are talking about the USA market and then to a lesser extent, Canada. I think Canadian sports fans probably are a little more patient than we are. I am worried a little bit just because I have shown a lot of my American friends rugby and all of them prefer 7s to 15s. It's easier to teach. It's more fun to watch. America's actually pretty good at live 7s, mostly because we have the PR 7s. And those are really fun to watch, but also like going to a 7s tournament is fun. I worry that there is a fun desert in the 15s. I'm sure we'll find a way around it at some point. I would say I don't want to because I'm a 15s player and fan first. But if it is the gateway, if it's the way to break into it and to get it, I don't think it matters to a millionaire like Michelle Kang, like what we do with the $4 million. She's like, it's for rugby. She probably doesn't even know there's a 15s. But that's fine because that's fine because it's one governing body. Yeah. And when Alona Mar came out a few weeks later and said, I'd really like to play in the 15s World Cup, I doubt Michelle Kang was saying, she's like, but I wanted it for the medalists. No, just women's rugby players. And I think in smaller rugby markets, like unfortunately America and Canada is still a smallish market, I will take any leg in.
Yeah, it will pay dividends eventually as well, right? Because there's going to be crossover of players, coaching, just ideas generally. So eventually, you see the fruits of it in the 15s game, even if it is just 7s exclusive.
I'm curious. So Lee and Josh came back after a little break and kind of took a dump on the 7s. They kind of poo-pooed the entire Olympic 7s, experience. And I was just really surprised by that. But it made me wonder, are Julie and I's reaction to how the Olympics went much different than they are in the rest of the world? Like, Will, were you completely blown away and telling everybody about the U.S. getting the bronze? Or was it like, yeah, that's just the 7s?
Somewhere in the middle. I really enjoy 7s. Obviously, I'm much, again, similar to yourself, Julia, 15s fan and 15s player first and foremost. If somebody asked me to play 7s, I'd straight up just go, no, not a chance.
And you're a scrum half.
Yeah, exactly. And every time I watch it, I'm just like, I hate the look of this. However, yeah, watching it, it's not something I've done as much in the last few years. It's like growing up, like first getting into rugby, I was a bit of a like 7s nose at one point, but that's a long time ago now, and I don't watch it as much anymore. But it was a real treat, and I really enjoyed it. I think The last time I was really, really like properly into it was the 2016 Olympics. Was great. I was less into the 2020 Tokyo Olympics sevens. I remember in 2016 tournament thinking like that was one moment where I really got into women's rugby. It was because I much preferred the women's tournament to the men's one in that one. For the pool stage, I much preferred the men's one this time round. And then in the knockouts, the women's one blew me away just because Australia were walking it at first, and then suddenly they bow out and don't even get a medal in the end. So with both USA and Canada knocking them out, that just felt like a huge seminal moment, you know. So yeah, no, I loved it. It was great. It was I think that sevens is really good for a tool for teaching people the essential skills of rugby union, and I think it's very easy in the moment to overblow how many people will get into rugby when you're watching it. But I really hope that it has had an impact because it's really entertaining.
Follow-up question: was Fun Desert one of the bands that you saw at Glastonbury this year?
Yes, yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I saw them twice.
Yes. So I'm curious. Who do you think is going to win the WXV one? Julia, starting with you. It seems obvious. Like, is the answer just England? Boo! Like,
yes.
It's funny because
yes.
I would prefer the Black Ferns to win, but even that's a little on the snooze side. Is there a possibility of a shocker to win this tier?
So exactly what you said. Unfortunately, realistically, I do think that it's very likely to just be England straight up. The only other real contender I see is the Black Ferns. And of course, the easy third answer, that is the other third answer that everybody gives, is France. Unfortunately, from what we've seen recently, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of age grade action out of France. I haven't been seeing a lot of senior level or senior side stuff. I don't know if they're there yet. I would love to see France beat the Black Ferns. That would be a lot of fun.
Well, what do you think?
You're torturing me by asking me this. Oh yeah,
I know,
because you're making us both say England.
I don't even want to ask, but we are talking about the tournament. Somebody is going to win.
The major downside to women's rugby is when you tune in to watch Wales play England every year, and you're like, oh god. One day I want to see us beat these, but the news that comes out the WAU every 6 months, you just like it's just getting further and further away.
They've decided this year they are not going to try beating England again.
Yeah,
great, thanks.
Great. Yeah, England are gonna win it, aren't they? And it's going to be another depressing day to be a Welsh fan.
See, I don't know if maybe this makes me a bad USA fan. When the All Blacks came to play in DC, I was like, oh, that's I could even take a train there. It's really not that big a deal. And then I was like, wait a sec. What is that going to look like? It is going to be the biggest.
I am here. I didn't go because
no wonder. Like, and we ended up losing by, I think it was 95, right? It's not that they scored 95; it's that we lost by 95 after scoring a couple of tries.
Scotland whipped our ass here. It's not good.
Not as much as they should have, considering that roster. Toonsy was like, watch this, and then...
That's true, but it was also boiling hot. You know that it's not safe for Scots people to play in that heat.
That's true. There's a dangerous freckle outbreak.
Oh my God. I do believe that several of them probably went home with life-threatening sunburns.
Hey, it's our biggest advantage. What can you say?
It's all we've got is climate change at this point.
In the MLR, we had Dallas had to go to Houston to play a playoff game outside in July. So what are you going to do?
The girls playing down in San Diego play so well because they're just afraid of the flooding.
Exactly. Will, what are your final thoughts on this tournament? Any of the so-called tiers. What's the thing that's got you most buzzing? If you could predict somebody, you're going to be in a bar a month from now talking to somebody, and you're going to be saying, "Did you see this? Did you catch this? What kind of highlights are you hoping to be talking about?"
I reckon.
Did you see Wales actually put out their roster?
Yeah, finally. I think Canada making an upset of some description would be great. I think that's usually feels like that should happen just once a year in WXV. I can't explain it, but with them having recently beaten the Black Ferns, especially, like I feel like something like that happening again would be a big moment. Obviously, they've not got Sophie de Goody, who's out with an ACL, which is heartbreaking for any rugby
horrible.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, also I think for a WXV1 point of view, that's probably the team I would get behind would be Canada. Or USA now because you two are in the room.
Oh no, I'm a huge Canada fan. My answer was actually going to be I would love it if Canada beats France.
Yeah, that would be
That's
great.
what I'm
That
hoping
would be
for.
brilliant.
That would be cool.
And yeah, hopefully just Wales getting back on track after a rough Six Nations. That's obviously, from a biased perspective, my number one concern going into WXV.
Bias is universal. We wouldn't have perspectives if they weren't biased, right? We have to find a different word for them.
Absolutely.
Julia, is Bookaboom going to feature this year? She's 33, I think now. Does she have another season?
Good question. So I've been thinking about a few folks hovering around that. I've been wondering actually about Kate Zachary as well. We haven't seen her on a few rosters for a while, and in fact, they are both over at Trailfinders playing. So I do wonder what both of them, but definitely Tyson Bookaboom. I wonder what she's thinking in terms of internationally. I will also say though, Canada is. I don't want to give the credit to Rugby Canada because I don't think they have much to do with it. I think it's the players, but the players themselves are definitely making more of an effort, whether it's purposeful or not. They're going and playing in several places. Canada's got players playing in Australia, playing in New Zealand, playing in France, playing in England. I think they are buckling down, whether or not Rugby Canada is behind them. I think that they saw beating the Black Ferns, and whether you want to quibble about whether that was the strongest Black Ferns they could have played, if it was conditions or happenstance that they beat them.
I hate those excuses. The Black Ferns fielded the team that they thought was going to kick Canada's ass, and they lost.
Exactly. And when you are, and the Black Ferns don't have it as bad as England do, but they're still pretty up there for like a lot of the time they step onto a pitch knowing they're going to win. I have never seen Canada take a pitch, even against teams they know they're going to lose to, or even teams that they know that they're going to beat the crap out of. For example, when they play us, and they never take the pitch like they're here to take it for granted. If they continue that, which I think they will, and I think that it's also just kind of the Canadian person. You and I know, David, the Canadian personality. They're just they aren't going to come and get up in your face, and it does make it a lot harder to predict what they're going to do. Of course, I'm an America fan. I love them. I can't wait to cheer for them. But in terms of like the upsets I want to see, or something that I think is going to really impress me, I think it's probably going to be Canada.
In the 2019 Men's World Cup, I think the most telling moment of all, and by the way, preface this by saying I support Scotland. The fact that Scotland were preparing to sue like the hurricane,
that's right.
and meanwhile Canada are like, how can we help clean this up, eh? They're out literally in the streets picking up trash and debris, and the Scotland are on the phone with their lawyers. I was like, oh, not a good look. But about the most Canadian thing possible.
And that is actually what you hear from a lot of the other players for other teams, is that when they're talking about like socially or how is it going off the pitch or whatever, everyone's always like, oh, the Canada girls are so nice. Apparently, the Ireland and Australia girls are the most fun to party with, and they're the ones you want to hang out with.
Yep.
And
story checks out.
And Canada is the one that everybody will be your friend, and they'll come in, they'll help. Do you want our extra kits? Do you want some? Whatever you need.
They make you some nice back bacon in the morning to nurse your hangover that you got from hanging out with the Aussies.
Exactly, and other listeners who are looking for a team to look at for WXV, if you're looking for one like in each level or whatever, Canada will make you feel happy every time they play.
Will, this might be a stupid question. Is the results of the WXV sort of direct promotion and relegation? In other words, if you are the top performer in WXV 2, are you automatically in WXV 1 the next year, or do they always do a whole new qualification process every year?
It's a whole new qualification process, isn't it? Yeah, yep. Rather than it just straight.
That makes more sense because things can change.
It's results of every regional competition. Okay. So it's the results of Rugby Africa Cup. It's the results of Pac-4, exactly. Six Nations. Actually, that might, and Asia Rugby Championship.
So out of these 18 teams that we've got in these three levels right now, Julia, do you see a team not coming back next year? Is there a team that you're like, they were really lucky to be here and it's going to be a miracle if they're back?
Well, I think that's always going to happen to at least one team in three, only because we saw it between. And so for people who don't know, this is only the second iteration of WXV. And last time, a team that we expected would be back, is Kazakhstan, is not back. I think there is a good chance each time going forward that something like that will happen in 3. I think it's interesting that something like what happened with Wales last time happened with Ireland this time. I wonder if it'll keep happening. But if so, if they'll build in some way to do it, because that team always either bombs if they're in the higher tier, or completely destroys if they're in the lower tier, which we need to work on. But what a sad question to end on. Just by the numbers. I
have to add one more question after this, because I realized what a bummer that would be. And we're all going to die. Good night.
By the numbers and experience and just the way things will go, the one that is at risk is Madagascar. They're the only one that's never played an international.
It's an uphill to climb for them, isn't it?
It's very hard.
For sure.
And it would be different if it happened to be like the Namibia women, where at least there is a framework that they can fall back on. Their union will help them rebuild, will at least know where to go to climb uphill. Madagascar doesn't have a men's side that has been particularly successful that they can look at or lean on. And then moreover, they happen to unfortunately be in a socioeconomic area where it's harder to get a leg up regardless, no matter how good at a sport you are, no matter how good a person you are, no matter, how well you pay your taxes and you keep the street clean. It's harder to come up in that place. And yeah, the nice way to say is that it's uphill. Yeah.
Will, of any of the 12 teams in the WXV 2 or 3, which team do you think is most likely to actually earn their way into the top tier next year?
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with Scotland. I think they should be disappointed they're not in WXV1 this year.
Yes.
I think that they're, next year against Ireland in the Six Nations, they'll be again really targeting that as just we have to pump them into the floor. And again, they've already got their rivalry with Wales, so that bit's sorted. I think that with each setback they've had, they've genuinely responded positively, and I feel like that's only going to continue to be the case. So regardless of how well this WXV campaign goes this year, I feel like next year they're going to be a stronger team.
Interesting. I'm curious. There can only be 6 in that tier, though. Who would they replace out of the current 6?
Probably Ireland, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
I think Ireland might, again, similar to what happened with Wales, struggle to maintain that standard for a full year. But in a way, I'd love to be proven wrong, because obviously the IRFU have done a lot wrong in past, but I'd love to see that change. So, but I think on paper, probably Ireland would be the team that would come down to 2 if that is what happens.
Julia, who from the 2 or 3 is getting up into the 1 next year?
Absolutely Scotland. There was a period a few years ago for Scotland women that was very dark. For several reasons, and yes. SRU screwed up in some monumental ways, and then screwed up again and again and again. Right, and it was just a cascading effect, and it was horrible. And I would never wish that on any union. But and Will touched on it. I think that they have responded better than any union that has had similar difficulties. It's interesting that we brought up Ireland, because actually I was nodding really enthusiastically when he said Ireland, but actually, I think USA is at more of a risk, specifically because I think Ireland has finally understood, after several years of screwing up so badly, that they have to start taking it seriously. They got rid of Nusafora. They fixed their contracts right after he left. There is at least some efforts at talking about maybe not keeping everybody Dublin-centric. There are several things Ireland knows that they can do to get
pricey town to live in, I'm told.
Yeah, and not the only place in Ireland that you can live, it turns out. It turns out, by the way, that the Interpros can be a decent development domestic competition. Also something that Wales is not bothering to try to learn or to try out. I think it's going to come down to teams that are willing to own up to their errors, make right fast, not just drag their feet, and sorry to keep hammering on WRU, but not just putting out flyers saying, we talked about it before, not just putting out a flyer saying, we're going to do this. Our aim is to be better at rugby. Our plan for next year is be good.
By the way, I'm hoping one of you can tell me, like, what's the deal with the David Nucifora effect anyway? Because I feel like, as somebody removed from it, I'm seeing an equal amount of Scotland being like, hey, we got Nucifora, and Ireland being like, we got rid of that bastard. Yes.
It's a tough one because I get the impression that he was just really apathetic towards women's rugby as a concept. Not that he like hated it, but I just think it wasn't a priority to him at all. Which obviously there are worse people who have been involved in women's rugby in past. But yeah, I just got the impression that he just went, well, the men's team's doing brilliantly, so that's my job being done. And Leinster are doing brilliantly as well, so that's kind of the end of it. I think that was all he really cared about. Meanwhile, all of the female players in Ireland were just getting left behind a little bit. That's my understanding. People from an Irish perspective might see it in a bit more detail than that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, all I was going to say is from what I heard from both people who have connections with the actual Irish team, the Irish women's team themselves, and just people who have kind of been around. There is a very prolific tweeter, John Cronin, who talks a lot about it. He's also, I don't think that he would listen to this, but just in case, I think he's the Leinster head coach as well. Anyway, has been talking about it, and it wasn't just one thing with Nucifora. It was that he didn't care about it, and that he was like, the men are doing great, all done, whatever. It was that people kept coming to him and being like, here's a little thing you could do that would have a big impact. And he was like, go fuck yourself, actually. And the thing is, you can do one or the other. You can just be apathetic and like, don't talk about women's rugby. Okay, that's a way you can be. But it's a really bad idea to be that way. And then also like tell women's rugby proponents to go fuck themselves. And he did both.
Final thing, I'm going to let you both go. I really appreciate the time. I'm 5 times as excited for this tournament to start as I was before we started talking. Like the permutations, they're endless. Some of these matchups I've never seen before, and I don't know when I'll see them again. It's going to be so great. I don't know why. I just have this idea of I want the Netherlands to be really good because I have no idea what to expect. I want them to be like, what's this style all about? It's one of the reasons I cover so many different competitions is, like you talked about, like the difference in styles. And sometimes it's even just like climate, like watching a Super Rugby game and then, an Exeter versus Bristol game. And then, it's snowing in one place, it's middle of summer in the other place, and they have this completely different style, and seeing those things back to back is always amazing. And I feel like that's one of the things they should be trumpeting about this tournament is that opportunity to see things that are completely different. Like, did you know rugby could be played like this? Here's a new example. But as I let you go, I want you to both, I think this will be fun. Both of you can be Michelle Kang for just a moment. You've got $4 million burning a hole in your pocket to drop on a women's program to make them better. But you can't pick Wales or the United States. We already got our 4 mil here, and it can't be Wales just because. But which team out of this entire tournament would immediately benefit the most? Which team could immediately take that $4 million and turn it into success on the field?
I will preface this by saying that with that $4 million, I would make Alex Callender a multimillionaire. Is the first thing I would do. But if that's not allowed, which I'm very reluctant to accept, I reckon I'd put it straight in Madagascar. That is where there's the most potential for growth. And the thing that is holding them back at the moment is funding. Although if I could split that $2 million each, I'd give half to them and half to Canada.
Oh, okay. Julia, where's your money going?
Oh, I'm very happy with Will's answer because it dovetails well. My answer was kind of conflicted between two, but mine was between Madagascar and Fiji. But I think, so I am of two minds. Madagascar needs it the most, which is just barely when you consider Fiji, just barely, but they do definitely need it the most. And there's so much potential there. And we don't even know how much is untapped because there's so much we don't know about that, both that market and that pocket of rugby. But in terms of where I think if I had 4 million and I could drop it now and it would have the most effect and that I would see the results of my money the fastest, I think it's Fiji, because Fiji is always on the precipice of becoming very good for women. And in fact, we know straight up the biggest barrier for them is the money. A lot of the women can't afford to get to training.
Right.
They don't have money for new workout equipment. They don't have money to feed players when they're at training. Those are the kinds of things that I think if remedied immediately, like dropping a huge sum of money would, I think they are the ones out of the teams that we're talking about that you could see turn around in maybe like a year or two.
That would be so cool.
It would be. And I mean, we're all name dropping. They've got Alana Kennedy now. And I feel like the potential is so big there. If Fiji can, and I know that it's not like something like Wales where it's just like, I know you have the money. What are you doing with it? Fiji, we know like they really don't have the money. But if they did, and if World Rugby were able to find it in their heart to help the women specifically, I don't think the men needed as much. I think there could be a huge uptick for them.
So if Madagascar somehow stay up this year and are back again next year for 2025, can we three all make it out to Madagascar or wherever they're going to be playing, see them in person, get jerseys, do the whole thing?
I was genuinely very close. If it weren't for the fact that they were playing in Dubai, I would have heavily considered it.
I'm not interested in going.
Nope.
Not to Dubai.
Nope. I'm barely allowed there. I'm barely allowed there as a person.
It's true. Okay, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm super excited. Can we please just go to sleep for 2 weeks and wait for this thing, actually 3, I guess, to get this thing started? I just can't wait. Any final thoughts for you? Go ahead.
I know you might have forgotten about it, but there is a match on Friday, Wales versus Scotland.
Oh, there is, isn't there?
We don't know that for sure. I'm not willing to say that yet.
Oh, no. Remember, right before we jumped on the call, they did confirm it's happening.
Yeah. I feel like they confirmed that people are upset that they haven't said anything. It's like,
again, I am the rugby cyberbully. When we jump off here, I'm just going to jump back on the Twitters.
There was a great thing from the show The West Wing where CJ talks about the non-apology apology. It's like, wow, I'm sorry that you got upset when I said that.
Oh yeah. And if anybody talks that way, it's rugby unions.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Will?
No, happy. I'll just echo the sentiment again. Men's rugby is not worth it. If you're going to bin anything, bin men's rugby. Women's rugby, superior. Keep it.
There we go. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers. Talk to you soon. And be well.